Hola chicos, vamos a discutir los verbos irregulares en la forma yo. Sometimes these are called go-go verbs or just go verbs. And these are verbs in the present tense that are just irregular in the yo form. So these are kind of a unique bunch. Vamos a empezar con los verbos con go. So all of these verbs contain go at the end, so that's why they are called go verbs or go-go verbs some of the time. So these include hacer, to do or make, poner, to put or place, salir, to leave or go out, traer, to bring, decir, to say or tell, venir, to come, and tener, to have. So what we're going to do is look at questions which contain the to form of the verb, and this is to demonstrate the difference between to, or any other form for that matter, and yo, to contrast. So all of them will contain a question in the to form, and then the response in the yo form, which is obviously what we're concerned with, which is the yo form of the verb, irregularity that happens. So, ¿qué haces? I'm asking, what are you doing? Hago mi tarea, I'm doing my homework. So you can see between haces and hago a big difference, which is the C goes away, replace it with a G, and then I go ahead and put my yo ending on, and they're all going to follow that pattern of having go. ¿Qué pones en tu locker? What do you put in your locker? Pongo mi libro en mi locker, for example. So whether you're putting something in your locker or not, or whatever it is that you're putting in your locker, you're always going to use pongo with the G. ¿A qué hora sales de tu casa? What time do you leave your house? Salgo a las 7. I leave or go out at 7 o'clock. ¿Qué traes a la escuela? What do you bring to school? Traigo mi iPad, mi almuerzo y mis libros. I bring my iPad, my lunch, and my books. ¿Qué dices? What do you say? Digo la verdad. I tell the truth. ¿Vienes a mi fiesta? Sí, vengo a tu fiesta. ¿Qué tienes? Tengo $5. So you'll notice with the last few, with decir, venir, and tener, they're irregular in the yo form because they have that go, but they're also irregular in the to form in a way. So decir, venir, and tener are all stem changing verbs. So notice with decir, I change my E to an I in my stem. With venir, E goes to IE, and with tener, E goes to IE. So these are boot verbs or stem changing verbs. So they have regular endings on them, with the exception of the yo form. And the difference for these ones is that they also have a stem change. So be aware of that. With irregular yo verbs, it generally means that the verb is only irregular in the yo form, but in the case of these stem changing verbs, they have the change in the stem in addition to having that irregular yo form. So watch for verbs like that. It doesn't change the G only stays in the yo form, but it does change the stem, so be careful with those. Verbos locos, crazy verbs. There's not really a rhyme or reason to these. They're just funky. There's not a pattern. So I can remember these verbs, these 7 verbs, as a category of go verbs, which all kind of do the same thing, and that makes memorization a little bit easier. But then we also have these crazy verbs, which don't really follow a pattern. So conocer, to know people or places, be familiar with. Conducir is to drive. This is not from your text, but I added it as something that kind of goes with conocer. They do the same thing. Conducir means to drive. Dar, to give. Ver, to see. And saber, to know. And this is like facts, information. So, ¿quién conoces? Who do you know? Conozco a Juan y Marisol. So I know Juan and Marisol. ¿Conduces a la escuela? Do you drive to school? Sí, conduzco a la escuela. So notice that conducir and conocer are 2 verbs that do the ZCO thing at the end. So there are a few verbs that do this. They're kind of a category as well, but they're rarer. ¿Qué me das? What are you going to give me? No te doy nada. I'm not giving you anything. Notice that dar goes to DOY, which is sort of a weird thing because dar is regular in every form. ¿Qué ves? What do you see? Veo un oso. I see a bear. ¿Qué sabes? No sé nada. What do you know? I don't know anything. So notice again that the 2 forms of these are regular. It's the yo form that has something funky about it, and then you just need to memorize that. If you look at ver, you might think, well, that looks pretty regular. It's ending in an O, which is what regular verbs do. The thing about it that is irregular, though, is that it's just a 3-letter verb. So if I took off the ER, which is the ending, and just put the yo form on it, would be vo. But since I keep the E in there to keep it a little bit longer, I end up with veo, which is irregular. So in your 3.1 notes, you have all of the irregular yo forms already written in. You just are responsible for memorizing them. So make flashcards, get on Quizlet, write them down a few times, practice them in sentences, say them to your friends, whatever you need to do to memorize them. But to show me that you've watched this video, I want you to write in all the to forms next to the yo forms. So you can go back if you need to see the to forms to be reminded. But remember that for most of them, the to form is completely regular, with the exception of the ones that have a stem change in every form but the yo form, and of course the nosotros form, because boot verbs don't change in the nosotros form. So go back and fill in all those to forms, and that will show me that you've watched the video. Bien, adiós y gracias por ver y escuchar.